Would you believe me if I told you that the Catholic Church is hiding something from all of Christianity? You're going to find out here in just a minute. See, I'll sit tight. Don't go anywhere. If you do, you'll be very disappointed. See you in a minute. Welcome to Tanakh Talk. I am your host, William Hall, broadcasting live out of Kingsland, Texas, USA, with another episode of Rabbi Tovia Singer's Let's Get Biblical Q&A, coming to you from Jakarta, Indonesia. Rabbi Tovia Singer. Now, if I could just get him to sing for us one day.
All the Jewish listeners will sue me. I'll have Jewish lawyers running after me.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So Tovia is from the root word tov, right? Good, right?
Yeah.
The goodness of God, basically. Tovia. Is that right? Cool.
That right there, yeah.
Cool.
And we covered a passage about where Tovia appears in Tanakh. It's very rare. In fact, if somebody can call in now and tell me where the word appears in the next 60 seconds, I'll send you a free set of my books.
Okay, hold on one second.
But that will be hard. You can't go looking up. You can't do that. You can't Google my name. First of all, it'll bring up the shows. It won't bring up. You can't. No cheating. It's very difficult. Anyways, but yes, Tovia means the goodness of God.
Okay, wait. We're going to start the countdown here in 3, 2, 1. Go. Okay, so 60 seconds, roughly?
Yeah,
Rabbi,
60 seconds.
So
I don't care if
you say when the clock's over. You say when the clock's over. That's what we'll do.
Oh, don't care where. 60 seconds, but it would be hard.
Well, 1 second. Let me turn the music off, too. There we go. Ringer's up. Okay, go ahead.
All
cool.
right.
All right, so, most people don't know.
Do you have everything set up for the show? Do you need to lock the door?
No,
go ahead.
We're good. Actually, the only thing I need to do is pull up.
Blow your nose. Let's get it all out now. Get it all out now.
Oh, that was a visual I think we could have all just totally avoided. Get it all out.
Get it all.
Yeah.
Get it out.
Okay, there you go. Now the phone number's on your line. So theoretically, we'll give you 60 seconds now. How's that?
No. It's my books. Don't give away my books. I didn't stuck. No, he's giving away a discount, the bargain on my head. I would have to pay for his big bargains. We'll start now. We'll start later. We'll start in 6 years from now. In 3 months. Why not? Singer has to pay for it, not me. It's on his head, not mine.
That's funny. Hey.
So on this Jew, I'm gonna go make offers. Don't make offers on my account.
I'll be out a trip to the post office. I mean, come on, that's worth something, isn't it?
You're a good boy. You're a good boy.
Cool.
So.
Okay, so well, nobody's called in. That's weird. Let me just verify real quick.
Because they're all doing a search on the Bible. It's too late.
And they can't find it. Okay, so that deal is off. Apparently, the doors have been closed.
They just can't find their phone. That's the truth.
Yeah, gotcha. Right. Okay, here we go. Shalom. Looking forward to the subject. Okay, cool. All right. Well, good to see everybody. Nice. Thank you all for joining us, and we're going to get this thing kicked right off the bat. So this is a really, really neat thing. I don't know that I've ever heard it, but to me, it would make more sense. And that is basically the Ebionites believe I'm going to put this out there the way it was written. The Ebionites believe that Jesus was born of a natural generation, ordinary sexual union between a man and a woman, Joseph and Mary. They also believed in adoption of Jesus as God's son. So why has the Catholic Church tried to suppress the Ebionites' doctrine? That's the question, and we cannot wait for the answer. Rabbi, take this away.
Sure. So just a very brief introduction. If somebody who is not a member of the Christian religion is observing the different sects of Christianity, a person would certainly find it very striking that Christianity is by far the most variegated religion in the world. We will find denominations or sects of Christianity that almost we couldn't recognize a Mormon and a Greek Orthodox, a Seventh-day Adventist, and the snake handlers. It's almost, they appear so different. Their theology is so not just diverse, but so contradictory and different that it's hard to even recognize them as the same religion. But I think most people would conclude that the diversity or this variegation that we observe today in the church is sort of a modern event. This is the current situation of the church and is largely the result of schisms in the 11th century between the East and the Western Church, 1054, perhaps the Reformation, which triggered the bloodiest religious war in human history of the 17th century, the 30-Year War. One may think that the variegated nature of the church is a result of it's a modern phenomenon. And if we dial the clock back 1,800 years, 1,900 years, we would encounter a far more monolithic church and find less diversity. So the variations that we observe, people might think, or I think most people think, is a modern thing. If we just keep going back in time, we're going to find that we don't have that kind of wide variety and different beliefs, very different beliefs, not customs or traditions within the Eastern Church. I'm talking about totally different beliefs. As it turns out, this is complete nonsense. It's not correct. And in fact, as we go back in time and in place to Christianity, to the beginnings of Christianity in the first century, the more variegated we'll find. We'll find denominations that are so strikingly different. For example, we'll find groups in the 2nd century, the Messianites, who believe that the God who inspired the God of Christianity, the God of Jesus, is not the God of the Old Testament. They're two different gods. The God of the Old Testament, Messianites would say, was God and created the physical universe, but he was inferior to the God of Jesus, the God of Christianity. You had Gnostic Christians who believed in many, many different gods. They had a dualistic view, but the key of the Gnostics is they took it a little bit further in that they held that the God who created this world, the God of the Jews, was really an evil God. The Marcionites didn't hold he was evil. They held he was just very tough. There were Christians who didn't believe Jesus was God altogether. There were Christians who believed that you had to keep the commandments to be a Christian, like those who were under the Jerusalem church, headed by James, the brother of Jesus. Where there are those who followed Paul, who disagreed with this completely and felt that the law not only doesn't have to be kept, but should not be kept for purpose of salvation. So it's really, really, really all over the place. There's some that held that Jesus never died. It was only an appearance. The Gnostics believe that really it was only appearance that Jesus died on the cross, that it was impossible for him to suffer. Tertullian, a church father, opposes. So there were very different views. Did Jesus actually die on the cross, or was it just an appearance? In fact, those who held that it was an appearance, the Greek term used for them is exactly that, just an appearance. The group we're discussing now is a group called the Ebionites. This is a very ancient group, a very early group, early group of Christians who did not believe that Jesus was born of a virgin, and he certainly didn't believe he was God. The gospel that they are said to have believed in was the Gospel of Matthew without the first 3 chapters, essentially. They believed in what's called that Jesus became the God of the Son of God when he was adopted at his baptism. It's called adoptionist theology. It's the theology that that maps best onto the book of Mark, where we're introduced to Jesus as an adult. Whoever wrote the book of Mark did not think there was anything unusual about Jesus' conception or his birth or the city he was born in. And therefore, we're only introduced to Jesus at his baptism, where Jesus is told directly that you are my son in the first person. It means Jesus discovers this at his baptism. So in essence, the idea is that Jesus was a very, very righteous person. This is what a very early version of Christianity believed, which probably the Ebionites believed, and I'll explain why in a moment, that Jesus was a very, very righteous, very great person, and God therefore adopted him, chose him to be his son, and the ceremony, the event at which God adopts Jesus to be his son, is at his baptism. So he was born out of the ordinary union of a man and a woman. In this case, it would be the sexual union of Mary and Joseph. And there was nothing unusual, therefore, about his conception, and nothing striking about his birth. Nothing about that at all. Now, this group, the questioner asks, is why does the Catholic Church not talk about them? Well, I wouldn't say they don't talk about this group, the Ebionites. They just don't like them because they were considered a heresy, and they were sharply hated as a heresy. A disclosure must be said now. None of the writings of the Ebionites themselves survived. Everything we know about them is from their opponents. You can only imagine how that might affect our view of them. But it is unlikely that church fathers of the 2nd century who discuss them, such as Irenaeus, he was an extremely important early church father. He was a bishop in what is today France. He's extremely important. The Ebionites are mentioned by Tertullian, very similar time, end 2nd century. They are probably referred to by Justin, who was an even earlier church father. But they're all 2nd century. So therefore, everything we know about them is from their opponents. However, then you can ask the question, well, how do I know anything? How do I believe them? Well, the answer is it's inconceivable that church fathers would ever invent such a schism, because it's embarrassing. And therefore, it's this criteria of embarrassment that therefore tells us that all the church fathers that discuss the Ebionites were very aware who they are, and this is at least what the Ebionites believed. Origen would have never made this up. So we have to accept what we are told in the patristic writings. The Ebionites are a very early expression of Christianity. They did not believe that Jesus was God or divine in any way. When the so-called Messianic movement today, this is a modern movement that's essentially a half a century old, not even. When the Messianic movement says that we go back to the original followers of Jesus, and we, the Messianic movement, really reflect the beliefs of the real, true, authentic followers of Yeshua and all these things, that is nonsense. The Messianic movement is a hybrid, is a machination that was spawned by the Christian Protestant movement that believes in every modern improvement, in italics and quotation marks, of the church, meaning that the Messianic movement believes the exact same thing that the Southern Baptists do. Same thing. They believe that, or the Assemblies of God might believe, if you want to go on the charismatic side. They believe that Jesus was God. He was the second person of the Trinity, that he was conceived to a Virgin Mary and born in Bethlehem to Mary. And they believe that he was absolutely fully God, fully equal to the Father. They believe in the ideas that were expressed about the nature of Jesus at the Council of Nicaea by those who oppose the Arians. The word Arian there is spelled with an I, not like the Nazis are spelled with a Y. Different, same sound, different spelling. So the Ebionites completely rejected all the innovations, the notion that Jesus was born of a virgin. That's a later invention. Paul never mentions in any of his writings those that are disputed or those that are not disputed. That means 13 letters, that there's anything unusual about Jesus' conception or birth. It is inconceivable that Paul believed that Jesus was born to a virgin, but he just didn't think that was important enough for him to mention. That's a later innovation. It's a later, I call it an improvement. The Ebionites rejected any notion that Jesus was divine. Now, some people watching this show may say, well, Paul did believe that Jesus was divine. As it turns out, I'm not going to go too deep in this because I don't want to go too far away from our starting point, but Paul believed that Jesus was divine, not in the sense that we would conventionally say that today, but rather that he was God's firstborn son. But he was not eternal and equal with the Father. Paul never held such a thing. In fact, Paul repeatedly expresses his belief that there was a hierarchy and Jesus is above the church and the Father is above Jesus. However, God did grant to Jesus the honors that are attributed to God. We find that in what's called the Carmen Christi of Philippians 2. So Paul, it's a Greek Platonic understanding of the Son of God. It has nothing to do with the Son of God in the traditional sense of Tanakh. It has nothing to do with the concept of the Son of God in modern Orthodox Christianity. This may seem confusing. The point is that the Trinity, as it is promulgated today in the Orthodox Church, lowercase o, is something that was unknown to the early Christians, and therefore it is obvious that as we walk back Christianity further and further, what we would expect to discover is exactly what we find. As you move back to a very early stage of the church, where the Ebionites in this case, we would discover a version of Christianity that's less elaborate, that does not have the improvements, that does not postulate that Jesus was divine in any sense. The Ebionites would have been hated by Paul, and Paul, incidentally, in both the letters that we are sure that come from the hand of Paul, and those that are disputed, the 6 that we're not sure about, but Paul is running against this kind of thinking because the Ebionites also insisted that a Christian had to keep the law of Moses. They believed that Jesus died for your sins, but they did not believe that because Jesus the Messiah came and preached his teaching and then died, that Christians no longer have to follow the Torah, the commandments that are expressed in the Torah. This is very, very important to the Ebionites. The Ebionites believed that the Torah of Moses was still completely binding, and there's nothing about Jesus's ministry, life, death, nothing about that would mitigate, that would free anyone from observing the commandments of God, that would nullify them in any way. Now, Christians may say, well, we believe in the law and Jesus fulfilled the law for us. These are talking points, but they don't map onto reality. Christians, except for some very unusual sects, don't keep Shabbos, they don't keep the law. The Ebionites insisted that you had to keep the commandments, that nothing about Jesus nullified that. They would have found Matthew 5:17 very attractive. It would have made a lot of sense. The Sermon on the Mount would have made a lot of sense to them. Do not think that I've come to destroy the law. I didn't come to destroy the law, but to fulfill the law. Anyone who changes one jot or one tittle of the law will be least in the kingdom of heaven. In fact, your righteousness would have to exceed that of the Pharisees and the scribes. Now, Christians quote this, and they'll nod their head. They're doing it right now, watching me say this. But even though these words to someone who's not a Christian could only mean one thing, it means that you keep the Torah. That means that you keep Shabbos, or you keep the commandments expressed in the Torah. To the Orthodox Christian, it doesn't mean that. To a person who is otherwise completely rational about what these simple words mean, will reject this because it's not orthodoxy. So the Ebionites, the word, it is disputed of exactly what the word Ebionites means, but probably the word Ebion means a poor person. So the Ebionites probably, their name is the poor ones. So as I said, nothing written by the Ebionites survived. It's not here. It is very likely they did, right? But there would be no reason for for Christendom to ever copy. Scribes were not interested in copying heresies, because publishing the work of a heresy would make no sense to an early Christian. And copying a manuscript, that's what they're handwriting a text, was a major undertaking. Imagine if you had to copy a 28 chapter book. That's a very serious business. And not using Microsoft Word, but using a quill on a piece of organic material, vellum or whatever. So the church didn't copy texts that they considered of the heresies, and what we know about the heresies are only known through the opponents of these heresies. As I said, these heresies, no doubt, flourished in the early first century, in the early years of the church. The early church fathers of the second century church fathers were opposed to Judaization, to any kind of making Christianity Jewish. To them, they hated Judaism, and they wrote books about this. This is not my biased understanding of the church fathers. They wrote books like Against the Jews. Irenaeus said things that would have got you thrown out of any Christian university today. If you were in Moody Bible Institute as a student or professor and expressed some of the phrases that came out of the mouth of Tertullian, that came from his hand, that have survived, you would be expelled from Houston Baptist HBU in a second. They would throw you out of the school. You would be considered clearly racist and anti-Semitic. So, in essence, they were deeply opposed to any Judaization. They wrote about this extensively because it was a real threat. Tertullian was a real apologist for the church. I mean, he was defending church teachings against those who opposed what he believed to be orthodoxy. Irenaeus was more of a theologian, but I'm not going to go into this. And that's why the Catholic Church never liked the Ebionites, considered them a complete heresy. Whatever happened to them, just the last part is, they were crushed, which means by the time we arrive at the 4th century, by the time we arrive at the Council of Nicaea in 325, they had already been completely thrown out of court. That does not mean that no one in the empire identified as an Ebionite or identified with the views of the Ebionites. No doubt there were people of the people who were Christians, which was estimated to be 5% of the empire, as in the years of Diocletian and following Constantine's conversion in 312. But if you were an Ebionite, if you embraced the teachings of the Ebionites or Nazarenes or whatever name you want to attach to this set of beliefs, you were so marginalized that you were crushed almost completely. And you were not on the stage any longer of what any Christian would consider to be a mainstream view. Now, there were other views, of course, that were argued over at the Council of Nicaea. The nature of Jesus. Was he fully equally divine to the Father or not? Well, it depends. It would depend on some priest from Alexandria who would argue this point, and it would be resolved in Constantinople, in Nicaea, in 325, and then would be further confirmed at the Council of Constantinople in 381 under the Emperor Theodosius. Very important Emperor Theodosius, because he was the last to rule over both the East and the West. So the influence of this head of the empire would be enormous. Following that split, the subsequent events that would unfold in the church would then move in one direction, east or in the west, in the 5th and 6th century. So that's who the Ebionites were. The Catholic Church hated them. I should say also one other thing. To add a little color to what I've just stated, I often talk about, with revulsion, as any normal person would, how the church fathers spoke about the Jews. And all you have to do is go, what did the church fathers say about the Jews? Just Google that, and it's going to come up. It's going to fly all over the place. And it's things you would expect to have come out of the 12 years that Hitler was Chancellor of Germany. It's horrible stuff. I should state that, as it turns out, the things that Christians said about each other were as nasty. That means that those who hated the Ebionites, those who hated the Marcionites, these proto-Orthodox kind of groups, they were very, very nasty, and they all said about each other they were not real Christians. Just like today, when you ask an evangelical about Mormons, they will immediately say that they're not real Christians and they're completely unsaved. And evangelicals speak of Mormons in a way that's, well, they consider Mormonism an absolute cult. Most evangelicals, I think, will be more respectful of Judaism, Orthodox Judaism, than they would of Mormonism. Got it? So right. I want to convey the point that the rhetoric was entirely nasty of when we consider not just how church fathers spoke about Jews, but they might have, it can be said that they're even more nasty when they spoke about other Christians who embraced a different Christology. I hope that answers the question.
Sure. Very good. Okay, I want to do this before I get too far along. So, guys, if you haven't been to outreachjudaism.org, you would definitely want to go there. All the books that Rabbi has is just so easily at your fingertips, and so many other resources as well. Sorry about the camera play here. So one of my favorite things I like here is the where'd it go? This one here. Debate. This is like not a debate. This is a 4 DVD lecture. Actually, I'm not even sure. Do you even have any more of these left now that I think about it?
I don't think so.
The 4-part DVD. Well, that's too bad.
Oh, you're talking about something that's completely not available.
Well, that's your job to tell them what's available. What's not. I'll just tell you what you had. This one is still available, I believe. The Chronicles explores fascinating prophetic dimensions hidden in the Book of Chronicles. The Paul Humber debate. I pronounced his name so wrong for so many years. Right, and then some other stuff here, a little rabbi versus a chaplain, nice little read here. The good thing about the reads is because you can carry it with you and actually underline things and highlight stuff if you want to. And then, of course, you can also get a copy of this awesome movie, The Disputation. It's really, really neat. So, and then, of course, the main thing, of course, is his 2-volume book set, which I'll show you one of them right here, up close and personal. Really beautiful, huge book. 2 parts. This is volume 2, of course, and I've got the screen up right this time, unlike last time. But you can see, if I can get to the right pages here, get past the forward and now if there's stuff, and get to the topic stuff. Here we go. So you can see here the way everything's laid out by topic. It tells you exactly what page to find it on. That's in the front and in the back. Let's just see if I can do this without looking here. In the back. Nope, apparently not. Okay, so there we go. In the back, it's laid out by verse, right? Book and verse. So front and back both cover both topic and verse. If you can't find it in less than a minute or so, it's probably not in here, which is why Rabbi is working on volume 3. If he is anyway. I think you are, right? I think we talk about this from time to time.
Yeah, I'm writing it during the commercial right now.
Nice. Good. That's excellent. Okay, cool. So we will go ahead and phone lines are open. Numbers on your screen, 855-95-BIBLE is 855-952-4253. Rabbi, I just want to throw this out there because a dear friend of mine on Facebook actually asked this question, and he is watching today, so I want to just put this out there. There may be only a short a short answer to this or a long. I'm not really sure. However, it's something that provokes a lot of curiosity for sure, and from this brother is truly genuine, and I really respect that. Let me find out where I put my messenger at right there. I got too many alerts popping up here. Give me 1 second, and it's going to be. Where are you? 1 second. Bear with me, please. And okay, so here we go. So there's been a lot of talk, a lot of suspicion that the Jewish people today are not the true Jews, that they've kind of like stolen the identity of the black Hebrew Israelites. And there's something very interesting that was brought out of a letter from either Vilna Gaon or somewhere in the Midrashal writings, and this is coming from a trusted website as well, so which is sepharia.org. Anyway, so in here it says it's really interesting. It says, oh shoot, can I even read that from here? Oh, it's zooming out. Hold on 1 second. Okay, it says Nimrod, and let me do it on my phone. I can't read that actually. Whenever I click on the picture, it goes too small. I can't see it. So 1 second. But basically, it says how Shem, Ham, and Japheth, and it says how they made the like Shem said he made his offspring or his descendants black but comely, and it says Japheth, it said his descendants were like black like the raven, and it said Ham's descendants were totally white. And it actually says this in this strange text, and so the suspicion is caused that this could be proof that the original Hebrews were actually black and not of Eastern skin color, so to speak, not white. But and my thought on this issue was when it says he made his descendants totally white. It's like, well, there is no such person as a totally white. I mean, you can even look at an albino. So you have to kind of look at it somewhat metaphorically in a way, not metaphorically, but just generally speaking. And if there was black like the raven, of course, I've never seen a human being black like the raven. I've seen a dark brown, of really really rich dark brown African Americans, but not black. So
let me just jump in here.
Yeah, please.
Let me just jump in here.
Okay.
Judaism is totally colorblind, which means that color just has no meaning at all. It's meaningless. To answer this question very succinctly, when our literature is discussing Shem, Chum, and Yophes, as whoever wrote this to you express, it doesn't say that these are the true Jews. That's the rub of your question. I'm going to just dispel this very, very quickly. The text that you're quoting doesn't say, and this group is the true Jews or that group is the true Jews. It's not discussing that, and that is the rub of your question. And therefore,
that's correct. Yes,
your question is that there is a concept like that does not exist, that someone of a different color is Jewish. As it turns out, Moses' wife was black. As it turns out, all you have to do is go to Eretz Yisrael. Well, you'll meet Jews of every color and from all different parts of the world. But there's nothing about this idea that maps onto our literature that Jews are a certain color. It's silly. There is we do have a text in Tanakh, for example, that King David was a redhead, and therefore, if he was a redhead, it's unlikely that he. But really is. These ideas are expressed by some. I won't get my life threatened here in Indonesia, but it's the expression of some crazy racist groups of these that I'm not very familiar with. I only used to see them standing with their pajamas outside of Port Authority in New York, and they would express such vitriol that I would just walk away from them. So this is all just craziness. I know that's not a very fancy answer, but that's the truth. But there's nothing in the text that says the Jews are and these are the true Hebrews. So let's move on.
Right, and just as my thoughts on the whole issue too is, at the end of the day, the only people that I know on the planet who are keeping Torah are the ones that we all know. I mean, people like you and we know. I do know some Black African Hebrews that are finding and joining themselves with Torah, but in the end of the day, it's like even if it was that color that actually was keeping it, well, they aren't any longer, which means that would pose a whole new problem. So anyway, so that's all I had to kind of say on that, basically. All right, we'll go ahead and move on to question number 2. The phone lines are, but let me get this off your screen real fast because that question is over. Question number 2, with regard to Psalm 22:16, either Christians or Jews are lying or mistranslating this verse. This text either says, "They pierced my hands and my feet," or, "Like a lion, they are at my hands and my feet." I'm just trying to figure out who is telling the truth and who is lying.
Got it. So this is a very interesting question. One heads up, the passage this person is referring to in a Jewish Bible, whether it's Hebrew or a Jewish Bible translators rendered it into, let's say, English or any other language, or French, but it was done by Jews. This verse will appear as Psalm 22, verse 17. In a Christian Bible, this exact same verse appears as Psalm 22, verse 16. It is the same verse. The reason why this variance exists, and which may be confusing, is that Christian Bibles do not count the opening text of many chapters in the book of Psalms as a verse. So when you have the opening statement of Lam Natseach, that's not verse 1. We do consider it verse 1. So typically a Jewish Bible in many chapters of the book of Psalms would count this as verse 17. Okay, so one verse later in a Christian Bible it appears as verse 16. The text says, let me read this text to you as it would appear in a Jewish Bible. Ki savavuni klovim adas mireim hikifuni, for dogs have surrounded me, a company or congregation of people who are wicked people have also come around me, have enclosed me. Ka'ari yodai v'raglai, like a lion, they're at my hands and my feet. Who is that talking about? It probably is not very striking. You would probably have to know the context. If you knew the context, it would be easy to understand, but if not, you might be confused. I want to do that a second time, as that passage would appear in a Christian Bible, a King James Bible. It would read something along this order. For dogs have enclosed me, a company of evildoers have enclosed me. They pierced my hands and my feet. That's what a King James or NIV, a New American Standard, that's how that text will appear. Who does that sound like it's speaking about? Well, any person will immediately go, that sounds exactly like a crucifixion. That sounds exactly like it's speaking about Jesus. Whether you're a Christian or not, you have to go, who? They pierced my hands and my feet. That's very striking. That certainly sounds very Christian. It sounds like a crucifixion. Okay. Now, how is it possible that I read to you the passage the first time and you really weren't sure who that was talking about, and read it a second time to you, same verse, Psalm 22, 16 or 17, depending on which kind of Bible you use, and it sounds immediately very, very Christian. Sounds like a crucifixion. The answer to that question is that there's one word that has been mistranslated by the church. The last phrase of Psalm 22 17 in a Jewish Bible, 16 in a Christian Bible says, Ka'ari yodai v'raglai. The word Ka'ari means like a lion. The ka is a prefix which means like, and Ari means a lion. It's a common word in the Hebrew language, biblical and modern Hebrew. It's a very typical name for a Jewish man. During George W. Bush's administration, his press secretary, who's still politically active, his name is Ari Fleischer. Okay, Ari Fleischer, his first name Ari means a lion. So Kari means like a lion. Like a lion, they're at my hands and my feet. Now, imagine you take the word like a lion and you use your mouse and select those words in so that these words are now white letters on a blue background in Microsoft Word. You hit the delete key and they disappear. And instead you put in the word they pierced and suddenly you have a brand new message. And that's what the church did. How do you change the word of God? As it turns out, the word Ari appears all over Tanakh. Ari, Aryeh, same root. It means a lion. Throughout Psalm 22, the speaker, who is David, the author of this chapter, is not speaking about anything in the future. He's speaking about his own predicament. It's part of a motif that appears much earlier and continues through. That is that King David felt abandoned, that he felt things were hopeless for him, that his enemies, and King David had many, many enemies. His own son wanted to kill him. His best friend betrayed him. His wife. King David had enemies on all sides. Ultimately, the very next chapter, David is still speaking and saying that ultimately God, the Lord is my shepherd. That God ultimately, even when I'm in the shadow, God is there. He comforts me. His rod, his staff comforts me. Okay, so King David is speaking in the first person about his own desperate predicament. The reason why King David is a person who is so loved, deeply loved, is because David, despite these vicissitudes, which might otherwise spiritually break anyone else, David remained strong, and ultimately he remained faithful to God. And throughout Psalm 22, King David uses a motif of animals, of lions, of dogs, of bulls, and though that poetic motif appears all over the text. In fact, if you go a little further in the same chapter, after and before, you'll see that he's still using these words. Hashieni mi pi aryeh, save me from the lion's mouth. That's verse 22 in a Jewish Bible, verse 23 in a Christian Bible. Save me from the lion's mouth. Well, when did lions attacking David? What lions is David referring to here? We go a little bit earlier in verse 14. Patsu olai pihem, they opened their mouth at me. Abire boshon kituruni. Well, what does that mean? These are like Aryeh Ter v'Shoeg, lions that are ripping and tearing. Like, what is going on here? So these texts are all speaking about lions that are attacking him, but they don't mean literally lions. It wasn't mean King David found himself in a circus, in a zoo, in the lion's den. Literally, it means his enemies. The church changed one text, one verse, the one word, and suddenly the meaning of the whole chapter changes. Early Christian, no one believed these verses to be about somebody crucified. That is a later invention. And if you just change one word and then rip it out of context, you have a brand new message that sounds Christological. This passage is used very frequently by missionaries to convince you that, in fact, in the Jewish Bible, there's an open prophecy that the Messiah is to be crucified. This, if you engage in any conversation with a Christian missionary, this pops up so fast you won't know what hit you. But you might ask the question, well, how do you know I'm telling the truth? I mean, let's say you're not a Hebrew speaker. If you are, this is nothing I've said is revolutionary, intriguing, you go, well, I know what the word kari means. If your knowledge of Hebrew is not great, just barely working, you'll recognize that word. But let's say you don't speak Hebrew at all. Well, how do you know I'm telling the truth? Maybe Rabbi Singer and the other bunch of his Jews who deny Christ, who are enemies of the Lord, they don't want people to believe in Jesus. So the Jews changed it. That means that this passage always said they pierced my hands and my feet. The Jews don't want you to believe in Jesus, just like in the gospel they're portrayed as the enemies of Christ and Christ killers. And what the Jews did is, in order to hide the idea that the Messiah is to be crucified, they changed the words they pierced, a phrase that is completely unambiguous, to like a lion, which is very ambiguous, and you're not sure what it is unless you read it in context. And those Jews changed it. You'll hear this a lot, although the term that the Jews changed it, people don't talk that way anymore, but you can be sure the church fathers, all the way to the reformers, all did. They all used terms like that. But how do you know I'm telling the truth? How could you be sure? How could you be sure? How could you lay your head down on a pillow tonight and close your eyes and be at peace that in fact that you are following the truth? Maybe the Jews are in fact the enemies of God and they changed the Bible, and pierced is the correct phrase. So there are many ways that you can know this, even if you don't speak or understand Hebrew. You're going, well, how is it possible? Well, I can't tell you go to a dictionary, because maybe whoever did the dictionary changed it. I can't tell you to go to a Septuagint, which missionaries love to go to, because the original Septuagint was only 5 books of Moses, and it would be later Christians that would shape the current Septuagint that you buy on Amazon. Church fathers like Origen. And therefore, the Septuagint that is accessible today is not from the hands of Jews before Christianity. You will be told this ad nauseum. It's nonsense. It's not correct at all. And if you look up the history of the Septuagint in my book, you can go online. Anyone who's knowledgeable will tell you the same thing I'm telling you. The original Septuagint was just the 5 books of Moses. Well, how could you really know? What does this word kari really mean? Kaf, Aleph, Resh, Yud. What does it mean? Well, all you'd have to do is you'd have to search in Tanakh where this word appears anywhere else. And today this is very easy to do. In the old days, you needed a concordance. And these were big, thick books, and you'd have to at least recognize the letters. Today, you can really go online. You can use software, and you can look up, where do we find this same word, and how is it translated other places? If the word kari really means pierce, and not like what the Jews say, it means like a lion, so it should be that if we find this word kari somewhere else in Tanakh, and believe me, a term like a lion you would expect to find you do, it should be that all the places the word is translated as pierced, and only here the Jews changed it. Conversely, if the Jews would never tamper with their text, and in fact it says the word kari really means like a lion, what we would expect to find is, if we search for that exact same word anywhere else in Tanakh is huge. There are, I think, 304,901 words in Tanakh, I believe. 904. It's the order of magnitude is astounding. If we look in Tanakh, what we would find is we'd find that exact same word, and all those other places, the Christian Bibles would translate correctly as like a lion, and only here they translate as pierced. You got it? Someone is being inconsistent. Got it? Someone is not telling truth. This person is correct. Someone is lying. Now, it doesn't mean today Christians are not their fault, but they're fully, I'm going to use the word, and maybe I'll lose our brainwash. They're just told to believe this. But I'm asking the Christians watching this to take a moment and to research this a little bit. As it turns out, if we look up the word kari, anywhere else where that exact same word appears, those same letters, Hebrew is a consonantal language. Forget the vowels. Don't talk about Masoretic text. It means we extract everything about a text that would make it Masoretic. Got it? It means take out the vowels, all the punctuation stuff. There is when we find the word, it's translated by the Christian Bibles everywhere else as like a lion, only here pierced. For example, Isaiah 38, verse 13. Isaiah 38, verse 13, Hezekiah is speaking, he's praying. He is discovered that he is set to die, and God is miraculously going to heal him. And he has a prayer that he says. The first words of this passage is, Shivisi ad boker ka'ari. I want to give you a moment to look it up. Isaiah 38:13. Even if you don't read Hebrew, you certainly can recognize the shapes of letters. I don't speak Chinese. Let's say it's so foreign to you, but if I see a Chinese word here and it just all I can see is the shapes of the letters, I can finally recognize that there are two words in two different parts of a book that are the two words that are the same, right? You can see that they're the same. Okay. So the fourth word, Shivisi ad boker ka'ari. The fourth word is ka'ari. I reckon till morning that like a lion. I'm talking King James translates it correctly like a lion in Isaiah 38:13. The New American Standard translates it like a lion in Isaiah 38:13. The New International Version translates Isaiah 38:13 like a lion. Your Ukrainian Bible, Christian Bible, a big cross on the front of it translates like a lion. Well, why does this exact word in Isaiah 38:13 mean like a lion, but somehow only here in Psalm 22, verse 17 or 16, depending, is translated as pierced? The answer is that it was altered only here, because Psalm 22 is what is cherished in the church as the crucifixion psalm. And what the church did to is that it altered this specific verse, this specific word in this verse, so that it looks like the writer, the psalmist, is speaking about Jesus, speaking about a crucifixion. Because there are many other passages from this psalm that are quoted in the Christian Bible. The opening of the psalm, so the opening of Psalm 22 opens with the cry of dereliction. It's quoted in the book of Mark. Eli, Eli, lama azavtoni. And that's picked up in Mark. Now, King David is speaking about himself, but Mark then puts those words into the mouth of Jesus in his version of Jesus's cry of dereliction in his passion narrative. There are 7 endings in the Gospels of what exactly Jesus said at the end. This is Mark's version. So therefore, it would fit quite well. I want to raise another point which will be very meaningful to people who don't read or understand Hebrew, people who are completely illiterate in the Hebrew language. You certainly have to, whether you embrace the Jewish faith, you're Jewish, or you embrace the Jewish faith, or you're a Christian, it has to be very frustrating to look on Tanakh as someone who doesn't understand Hebrew at all, know that the Hebrew text is the original, it's the Word of God, and have no access to it. I hope I can do something during this broadcast to convince you that it's a good idea it's worthwhile studying it. But I want to bring another proof for you that will demonstrate irrefutably that the church changed the text and the Jews didn't. And let me show you how. I'm going to show you how I'm going to do this. I want to review this point for a second. According to the Jews, I'm just going to use this kind of language for a moment. According to the Jews, Psalm 22, verse 17 in the Jewish Bible, again 16 in the Christian Bible, says says like a lion, they're at my hands and my feet. Ka'ari yodai v'raglai, like a lion, they're at my hands and my feet. Our view is that Christians changed it to read, they pierced my hands and my feet. They would, because it sounds like a crucifixion, they would then insert that alteration of the text and inserted into translations, which no Christian could read the original. Almost no church father, with the exception of some notable figures like Jerome and Origen, none of the church fathers were conversant in Hebrew. None of them were. So therefore, translations were everything, whether it was a Septuagint in the East, a Greek translation, or the Vulgate in the West. Made no difference, Greek, Latin, whatever it was, they were depending on that. The churchgoers were all depending on those translations. So, what I want to convince you of is the following, that nobody in the early days believed that Psalm 22:16 said, "They pierced my hands and my feet." Everybody knew that the text said that, like a lion, they're at my hands and my feet. And subsequently, Christians changed it. They doctored. Who is an interesting question, but that's not germane. But Christians altered the text to read Christologically. Don't listen to the people talk about Septuagint. That's all nonsense. Now, conversely, what do Christians say on the other side? What do Christians argue? They argue the verse. Listen very carefully, or you'll miss this point. The argument that Christians are making is that everybody knew that Psalm 22, verse 17/17 said, "They pierced my hands and my feet." And at some point, the Jews changed it to read like a lion. And the Jews, and therefore, in order to mask the Christological message. You got that? It's one or the other, because you change just one letter and you have a cat and kit. You just change one letter, you change one word, and boom, it's gone. How do you know? So I'll share something with you I've never shared on the show. As it turns out, if this verse was known to state, "They pierced my hands and my feet," why is it that passage never quoted in the Christian Bible? Stop. Why in the entire Christian Bible, which is quoting from Psalm 22, before and after, why doesn't this verse ever appear in any of the Gospels? Why in Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, letters of Paul? The crucifixion is incredibly important to Christians who are writers of the New Testament. Why isn't there a single author of the Christian Bible who thought that this verse was not important enough to quote in the New Testament? Think about that for a moment. In order for you to believe that the Jews are lying, this is what you have to believe. You have to buy into the following: that Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, whoever wrote those books, Paul, the epistles of John, Peter, and so on, they all knew that it said, "They pierced my hands and my feet" in Psalm 22. But they thought that that verse wasn't important enough to quote in their writings. Does any sober mind, does any rational mind accept such reasoning? Every sober mind has to reject this completely. Do you really think for a moment that Paul believed that there was an explicit reference to the crucifixion in Psalm 22, and Paul is quoting from Tanakh all over the place, but he goes, "Not really, this is not so important"? That's nonsense. That can't be. That's impossible. Paul would have quoted this up and down. Whoever wrote the book of Mark, Mark is essentially one big passion narrative with a long introduction. Mark, where the crucifixion is incredibly important. Mark went, "Oh, it's not so important." And the proof to you that it's very important is this is one of the go-to verses, top 3 go-to verses that missionaries will use. Therefore, it is clear that there's no way in the world that the writers of the Gospels, if they believe that Psalm 22 stated, "They pierced my hands and my feet," there's no way in the world that if Paul knew that in Psalm 22 it said, "They pierced my hands and my feet," that he would have not quoted it. He would have quoted up and down. It's never quoted. That is never quoted. It only appears later in the 2nd century. Well, why didn't he quote it in the New Testament? The answer is that no one figured out how to molest the Jewish scriptures in the 1st century in this way on this particular passage, which proves only one thing, which points only one direction, that in the 1st century, during a time when the Gospels and the letters of Paul were written, nobody, Christians included, thought that it said in Psalm 22, verse 16/17, that it stated, "They pierced my hands and feet." No one did. And there was somebody who tampered with the text subsequently, and you can see why Christian would stumble over this text, because Psalm 22 is very important to the church, would alter this one passage and then it would subsequently read in Christian translations as they pierced my hands and my feet. Why? How do you know this for sure? It doesn't appear in the Christian Bible. Why isn't this quoted? This would be everywhere up and down. If you don't believe what I said, if what I said to you does not convince you, should never listen to anything I say, should never read anything I write, and don't listen to me, because that means that you're so in the camp of Christianity that no reasoning could make. It means you a priori believe in Jesus, believe in Christianity, and no matter what I would say, it would be irrelevant to you. And what can I say? There are people who will just not allow any information that can possibly contradict what they believe. They will not allow it into their system at all. And in such case, I'm not saying this to be nasty. I'm saying it to make a point. You're completely excused. That means there's no critical thinking here at all. Now, you are going to again be hit with the Septuagint. I want to ask you another thing. Now, as I mentioned to you earlier, what is called the Septuagint is not the real Septuagint. This is not some conspiracy theory. I don't have it in front of me, but I'm sure if I looked on Wikipedia, Septuagint, everything I'm telling you is there. That the original Septuagint was the 5 books of Moses. You'll never hear that from missionary. They'll tell you the rabbis, 2,200 years. Nonsense. One other thing, I want to say this to you. If you're a Christian, you're not a Christian, don't even listen to this. When someone says to you, well, it's in the Septuagint, it may not be in the Hebrew. The Jews changed it. We have a Dead Sea Scroll text, Nachal Chever. It's too far afoot of the subject. I cover that extensively in volume 2 of Let's Get Biblical. That there is no fragment that says they pierced in Nachal Chever, which is a text little later than Qumran. And Nachal Chever is an area some 30 kilometers south of Qumran in the Dead Sea area. I don't want that to interfere with your thinking. I want to ask you, if you're a Christian in any way, Messianic in any way, and you're being told, well, actually, okay, so the original Hebrew text, or the text you would find in a Jewish Bible, is there something wrong with it? Is a Masoretic text? What does that even mean? But we have the Greek text, we have a Latin text, we have a Chinese text. It says differently. So, and therefore we follow that because that's more accurate than the Hebrew. In what universe is a translation superior to an original? Not in mine. But I want to make another point that I don't think I've ever expressed. If you became a Christian in your life, is this what you were sold on? Or are the rules shifting? When you became a Christian, when you got baptized, became a believer in Yeshua, however you want to convey that phrase, what were you told exactly? Here's how you were sold a car. You were told, if you look at the Jewish Bible, the Hebrew scriptures, Jesus is popping off every page. He is prophesied in the original Hebrew text of the Jews. It's there. For some reason, the Jews are blinded. There's a veil over their eyes, whatever. But what sold you on believing in Jesus was that it's in the Hebrew. And then what happens is you finally encounter people who don't accept the Christian religion, and we show you that, well, actually, it's not in the Hebrew. There's a very, very, very serious problem here. And then all the people who converted you, who were involved in evangelizing you, suddenly go, well, it actually is a Greek text. It's actually in some sort of Latin text. It's in a Chinese text. It's an Eskimo text. It's some other. It was well, that's not what I was told when I signed on to this thing. You were not told this. It's only later when you bought the car and you did it and you had all these things, you totally invested and you're married into it, and now your husband is this or your wife is this, your kids are... No, they're telling you, well, actually, remember what we told you on day one? It wasn't exactly correct. I'd like you to think about that carefully. The reason the New Testament writers never quoted it, because they all wrote during the first century. In the first century, no one thought of raping, molesting the text in this way. It was a later Christian invention. And I ask you, if you're not familiar with the Hebrew language, get familiar. But in the meantime, there's no time to waste. You can know for sure that the earliest Christians did not believe this, or they would insert it in the Christian Bible. No one would have believed it because this word appears everywhere in Tanakh. The word Ari, all over the place, including this chapter. And it's translated as lion. Only here appears. Why? So you know the answer why. Anyways, thank you for that question.
Okay, very cool. Very cool. Lots of activity today. Not uncommon, but most of the time I don't notice it. I can't actually follow along with it. It's okay, though. All right, so we're going to move on to the next question here. Let me scroll down to it 1 second. I had it queued up. One moment. Oh, man. What a bummer. I had it actually clicked up, and I must have drifted off of it. There's a question that I want to play as a voice clip, and somebody asked about the phone lines. I don't know why they're actually not ringing into the studio to where I can actually answer them, but it does. I am popping up new voicemails, so we'll see if we can kind of approach those this way. Okay, so bear with me 1 second. Well, I think this was it right here. Actually, let me just see if this is it. Yeah, I think this is it. Okay.
This week, or the water was last week?
Yeah, here we go.
Concerning the soon-coming Messiah, Rabbi Tovia, concerning the soon-coming Messiah, what are the top 4 tasks Messiah will complete? And considering the many different groups of Jews that are separated due to their varying observances and stringencies, will the Messiah bring clarity and a rod of correction which will bring the Jews, Israel, under one banner? Will he speak with God and perform wonders by the power of God, like Moses, Elijah, etc.? Thank you.
Awesome. So I know we kind of briefly hit this by someone else's question, but I like the way he worded this. It's a little bit more specifically detailed. What are going to be the top 4 things so that we'll all say, oh, that must be him because he did this, 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 and this. So one thing that's always amazed me was the story, I call it damage control, based on stuff I've learned from the comparison with the New Testament and the Hebrew Scriptures, is the damage control created by Paul, which you pointed out in many, many shows, and how the second coming thing is the only answer they could come up with. And so whenever the Messiah does come, the first and only time, the one that everybody's thinking of the same person, what are the first 4? What are the very top 4 things that he's going to check off the list?
Okay. Just a point of clarity, so there's no misunderstanding. No misunderstanding later. Just so we're using the same language.
Okay.
If I asked you who parted the Red Sea for the children of Israel, for the Bnei Israel to pass through, what would the answer be to that question?
Sorry.
So I think, go ahead, who parted the sea?
I would say it would be similar to the question of how many animals were there on the ark, and the answer is usually always only one pair. They don't see the other part of the story. So knowingly, they would point Moses.
I want you to take a moment. I want you to think about it. Let's just pause. I'd have tried to, God forbid, put you on the spot.
That's okay.
But I'd like you to reconsider that.
Okay.
Let's talk that through.
Okay.
This is not in any way a trick question.
Okay.
Who parted the Red Sea? Don't worry. Just give me whatever comes to you first.
I would say Aaron.
The Red Sea.
Oh, actually, are you talking about Elijah?
No, the Red Sea, when the Jews came through the Exodus.
Yeah. So I would have said Aaron or Moses or Aaron.
Moses.
Right.
You'd say Moses.
Okay.
Okay. So if we can say Moses parted the Red Sea for the children of Israel to pass through, then I can answer that question, map that question really easily. Of course, if you asked Moses who parted the Red Sea, Moses would say, I didn't do anything,
Right.
and I only did what God told me, and that is I stretch out my staff over the sea, and God did it. So I just don't want that coming up later. So we say that the Messiah is going to do these things. I mean it in the way that Moses did. Moses didn't do anything by his own power, but the Mashiach, who is going to be the heir of all the entire Davidic dynasty, of all the promises made to David HaMelech of blessed memory, are going to be fulfilled. But the Mashiach himself has no power to do these things. It's HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Almighty, blessed be His holy name,
Amen.
is doing everything. Just wanted to clarify that so people don't get mixed up. Okay, is that simple?
Yes.
Okay,
Very
good. Okay, so what are the top 4 things that Mashiach is going to do? Meaning God's going to do, but Hashem is going to perform it in the Messianic age at the advent of coming Mashiach. I want to say explicitly in Tanakh. And the answer is very simple because it's everywhere. I'll just rattle off a few. He will bring about the universal knowledge of Hashem. As it says in Isaiah chapter 11, verse 9, the knowledge of God will cover the world as the water covers the sea. In fact, we are told, the only thing we're very specifically told that the Mashiach will do is in Isaiah chapter 2, we are told this in a number of places, that he will rebuke the nations. And as a result of this rebuking, that the nations will turn to God, they will flow up to Yerushalayim, for Ki Mitzion Teitzei Torah Udevar Hashem Yerushalayim. Ki Mitzion, out of Zion will go for the law and the word out of Hashem Yerushalayim, and the word of God will come out of Jerusalem. The knowledge of God will cover the entire world, and there will be no longer any other religion but the one true religion that follows the one true God. There will be enemies of God who will fight in the war against the children of Israel at the end of days, but they will be utterly destroyed. See Zechariah 14, actually 12, 13, 14. The whole chapter 12 is all about that, the final war. Ezekiel 38 and 39. It's explicit. Mechemes Gog uMagog. Explicit, but everyone else will immediately recognize truth. This point is so important, I wouldn't dare raise anything else that would occur. Now, that answers the other question as well. Will there be any division among the children of Israel? So the answer is no. Not only will the children of Israel, all who are survivors, there will be those who are rebelling against God. There will be Jews who do that too. You'll see in Isaiah 66, Zechariah 14. Believe me, there are some nasty Jews, but that's not who we're talking about here. But they will all be unified. In fact, even this is another prophecy. Even the lost tribes, meaning the tribes who are not loyal to the Davidic dynasty, but rather split off on their own and will carried away ultimately by the Assyrian Empire, with finally utter destruction with Sancherib. So they will be reunited. The tribes that were carried off will be restored. Ephraim, the lead tribe, will be restored to Judah. See Ezekiel 37, where Ezekiel takes 2 sticks, and one he writes Judah and his companions, the other Ephraim and his companions, broke it apart and placed them in your hand. They become one rod in your hand. So the ingathering of the exiles, the furthest most islands, the end of the world, the children of Israel will be restored. See Isaiah 49, verse 6. There will be building of a Beis Hamikdash, the temple, the final temple that will stand forevermore in Jerusalem, and no one who is both uncircumcised the heart or the flesh, see Ezekiel 44, verse 9, will be able to even enter into the Beis Hamikdash, into this final sanctuary of God. And there will be a worldwide peace in the world. La yisa goy al goy cher v'lo yilmudu oid milchama, Isaiah chapter 2, Nation will not lift up sword against nation, neither will they learn of war anymore. If you look out the window and you see war, if you turn on the news and you see battles, if you open a newspaper and you see that there are people who are at war with each other, you can be sure Mashiach did not come. And if someone says he did come, don't believe him. Look out the window, because when Mashiach comes, people are going to take their implements of war, the swords and the spears, and they're going to reshape them into implements of agriculture, plowshares and pruning hooks. Where does it say this? Read Isaiah chapter 2, the opening of chapter 2, and turn right now about. There's nothing I'm saying that's revolutionary. So there'll be a worldwide peace throughout the world. If you see wars, you can be sure Mashiach is not here. Now, will a war be the antecedent event that will trigger the coming Mashiach? Yes, for sure. But that event, the final coming of Mashiach, will not. Now, will the Mashiach himself bring peace? Well, yes, because we are told in Isaiah 2 that he will in fact rebuke the nations. In fact, we're told also in Zechariah chapter 9, verse 10, that the nations will jettison war, and the peace will fill the world as a result of the teachings of the Mashiach himself. But does the Mashiach by himself can do it? The answer is he can't do anything by himself. He could teach, but Hashem is going to perform these great acts and open the doors to repentance for the whole world. Turn back. So here we have many. There will be a resurrection, a physical resurrection of the dead. See Daniel chapter 12, verse 2. See Isaiah 26, verse 19. There will be a final state for those who are loyal and faithful to Hashem, and that is that their bodies will be resurrected. There is a reason why that the physical body, the flesh, it decays utterly in the grave, but the bones don't. There's a reason why you can dig up bodies from thousands of years ago, and you will find the bones. There's a reason why if you take the bones and you try to burn them, you take a torch that's very, very hot, much hotter than the fire that comes out of your stovetop. You take a blowtorch. I don't even know what the heat of a blowtorch is. Whatever it is, and you put it to a bone, it will not be destroyed. It'll damage it. It will not be destroyed. Well, why not? What kind of instruction is this in the creation that bones withstand these great heats? The heats that would melt metals will not melt the bone, because bones are filled with calcium, and calcium requires so much heat to burn calcium that the whole house would burn down before the bone would burn. What kind of design is this? What did HaKadosh Baruch Hu do? The bones are preserved. Now, could some idiots do something terrible to the bones and it could be catastrophic? Yes. Never allow yourself to be cremated, and if someone asks you for cremation, never honor that request. They don't know what they're doing. Please don't send me emails asking me what happens if my mother was cremated. Don't ask me that, please, okay? Hashem ultimately judges people what they understood and did. I can't answer that question directly. But do not, God forbid, no matter what, never allow, never ask in your will for it to be cremated. If you did, change it immediately. And if someone dies, do not honor such a request, and convince everyone you know that they should only ask for burial and never anything to be done with the body. Nothing. You don't need fancy coffins. You really don't even need a coffin and any of these things. But don't allow. In fact, I'll tell you something that's a little unpleasant. And if you want, you can shut it off now if you don't have a stomach for it. What they do when they cremate a body, people think this is the ashes of the body. That's not true. Because the ovens, the crematoria that are used to burn bodies in a cremation can't do because of what I told. They can't really burn the bones. So in fact, after the cremation, there's bone all over the place, and they actually have to grind down the bone into a powder, and that's what people have. To a large extent, much of that whatever it's called, I don't want to think about this long, but whatever it is, the so-called ashes, as much of it is ground bone. It's a horrible violence. If what I said upsets you, good. Good, not that I want to upset you, Chas v'shalom, but sometimes you need to hear the truth, that you'll be moved to change your position and opinion. Don't listen to people who start to philosophize and go, well, God could, don't do that. Stop it. Don't question anything like this. Just follow Tanakh very, very clearly. The people are buried. Even the worst person who is executed, their body is buried immediately. No cremation. Don't bring me the case of Sheol where bodies... I just want to get this part, and I apologize. I'm diverting completely, but this is a very important topic. In battle, because you have to have kavod hames, you can't honor for the physical body, you can't destroy it, but there was a problem that came up in the battlefield. If soldiers were killed, and you see this in Tanakh, in the battlefield, so they had to take the body with them and bury it eventually. But you can't carry a dead body with you because it'll spread disease all over the camp. So there was a method that was used in order to solve this problem. Means, what do? You need to want to bury the body at some point. But the problem is you can't have a dead body with you because it'll spread disease. So what they did is they used a kind of lime on the body so that the flesh and all the soft tissue would dissolve, but the bones would remain. And then they would take the bones with them and bury them. And that resolved. This is not the go-to result. Don't do this l'chatchila. Never allow anything like this to happen to you. But in this kind of circumstance, what do? You need to bring the body for eventual burial. You can't carry around the dead body with you. There's no refrigerators. None of that stuff existed. So that was a solution that was used. So be very careful with that. So we have the resurrection of the dead, the building of the Beis Hamikdash. These are all the things that will happen when the true Mashiach comes. There are now, as it turns out, none of these events occurred at the advent of Christianity. Nothing happened like this in the first century. There wasn't a universal knowledge of God, but as a result of the wars with Rome, the knowledge of God and the observance of the mitzvah diminished as the children of Israel were spread into a bit that offends a very deep, dark exile. There certainly was no worldwide peace as a result of these wars. There was just battle everywhere, and the destruction of the Second Temple was a much more horrible battlefield than the destruction of the First Temple. The destruction of the First Temple, relatively speaking, was a cakewalk compared to the war with Rome. Why is not relevant here? Just I assure you, the destruction of the Second Temple, the war with Rome from 66 to 70 was a nightmare beyond your imagination. The Jews were not gathered in at the advent of Christianity in the first century. They eventually would disperse throughout the empire and beyond. So those are things that the Mashiach will do. Again, I say the Mashiach will do in quotation marks because, of course, the Mashiach will be a tzaddik. Please God, he'll come soon. He's the direct descendant of David, ben Achaben, son after son. And she is going to speak to the nations, rebuke them, teach. The nation Torah will spread through all over the world. But all these events will occur only through the power and might of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, of the Holy One, blessed be his name. May it be that we see the coming of the true Mashiach, b'meher b'yameinu, quickly in our time. Thank you for that important question.
Oh, awesome. Had my microphone moved out of the way. Okay, so we're going to play this next clip. Okay, so this is coming from John Anon, I believe I pronounced that right, on YouTube. And he called in with a voicemail. Yeah, for whatever reason, the actual phone lines aren't ringing through. But that's probably going to be good. It'll be less of a distraction for me, and I can listen to the voicemails. Okay, so one second here. By the way, if anybody lives close by and wants to help me produce this show, I would greatly invite you. So anyway, all right, cool. Here we go. We're going to play this clip. Now, I need to let you know that this clip is it's spoken very fast, so I can pause it a little bit as we go along, and then we'll clarify it at the end to make sure everybody knows exactly what's being asked. Okay, here we go.
I've heard Tobias say the prince of Ezekiel 46 is David, and we know the king isn't allowed to be high priest in the Davidic kingdom.
Now, do you want to take notes along the way?
No, continue. Don't stop.
Okay, here we go.
Therefore, that prince cannot be David, as he is performing the high priest duties. We also know the two anointed, Messiah ben Joseph and Messiah ben David, are coming. If we look at 1 Chronicles 5:2, it states Judah is the chief leader, the king, but the birthright is Joseph's. The birthright is what it takes to be able to offer the sacrifice. Certainly, the Levites will work in the temple as they are substitutes for the firstborn birthright holders. We also know the prince cannot be Levitic, as Ezekiel 48 tells us the prince owns a small portion of land. And again, as Psalm 2 tells us, David owns the majority of the whole world, not just a small portion. This prince is said to own. We also know there are 12 princes that make up the tribes of Israel. If Messiah ben David is the prince for the line of Judah, it stands to reason Messiah ben Joseph is the prince from the line of Joseph. And lastly, it says this prince in Ezekiel 46 will have sons. Only one tribe had two sons that become separate tribes, and that is the tribe of Joseph. His two sons are Ephraim and Manasseh. These are the sons that the prince can bless with inheritance. This makes much more sense than David blessing a handful of David's possible sons, only owning a small portion of land, and not possible for the king to also be high priest. Thanks.
Okay, so just to clarify, the question simply is, I'll make sure back up because I had him to restate the question. The question is, how is the prince of Ezekiel 46, King David, with the evidence that he provided in his voicemail? It can't be David, he says.
Okay.
Now,
Carefully.
I wrote some notes here for like 4 different passage sites that he actually presented.
I'm familiar with them. I'll go through it. It's
Okay, super. All right, here we go.
All right.
Restate the question best for our viewing audience.
I can't restate it because it's way too long, but I'll sum up his question like this.
Okay, good.
The prince who was described nearly 20 times at the end of Ezekiel, all the way through to almost to the very end of the book, is the Mashiach who will come quickly in our time. He is called David. Doesn't mean he actually is David, but he's called David because it is through the promise that God made to David in the Davidic covenant that he will emerge as the final king. So he's given this name. Doesn't mean that his name actually is David. He is not the priest or the high priest, because you can't be a Davidic king, a direct son of David, son after son. Only patrilineal, biological lineage, nothing else. Females do not matter here at all. Jews can marry within tribes. One tribe can marry into another tribe. It's not a problem at all. But the descendants only go after the father. We're not talking about who's Jewish. We're just talking about what tribe you're from. How do you know? Numbers chapter 1, verse 18. The priests are descendants of Aaron, Aaron. I'm a priest. I'm a direct descendant of Aaron, ben Archaben, son after son. Therefore, I'm not trying to be cute. I cannot be the Mashiach. It's impossible. Neither could my father be the Mashiach. He should be well. Hashem should give him many years in health and happiness. It can't be because we are from the house of Aaron with the Bnei Aharon. It's not possible. You cannot be both. Now, there is nothing in Ezekiel chapter 36, 34, 37, nothing in Ezekiel 46, 45. All these chapters we have the prince. There's nothing that says that he is the priest. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We see there that the priest, in fact, the family of Tzadok, I'm not going to go into why, but there's a very prominent priestly family who was very prominent because of its unison and devotion to Shlomo HaMelech, King Solomon of blessed memory. This will be a preeminent priestly family in the Messianic age. It says so explicitly. Read Ezekiel 43 and 44, 45, 46. It's everywhere. We know who the sons of Tzadok are. We know who this priestly family is. They can't be the Davidic dynasty. They have to be different. So first square away this. The Mashiach cannot be the high priest. Be very clear about this. The high priest must be from the sense of Aharon. Must be. And they are. There's nowhere in these texts that it ever says that the prince is the descendant of Aaron, that the prince is the priest, the priest of Aaron. That is the sense. Nowhere does it say such a thing. On the contrary, we see in the very past chapters that you quoted from that the Mashiach will be bringing an offering, Ezekiel 45, 20, 20, 22. But in fact, it is the priests who will in fact officiate at that event. Did you hear what I said? We see it explicitly in Zechariah chapter 6, verse 12 and 13, that there will be the Mashiach, who is called the branch, who will come from beneath, from being a descent of, in the context is Zerubbabel. It will be the Mashiach. It's called Tzemach, the branch. And there will also be a priesthood. It's Messianic. And each one will sit on his own throne, and there will be peace between the both of them. That means the council of peace, it says explicitly, will be between the both of them. Both of them. Both of them. That's what the text says. Well, is he schizophrenic? Does Mashiach have to be on Haldol? Does he have a multiple personality disorder? The answer is no. This is completely incorrect. The book of Hebrews will seek to solve this problem by coming up with, I'm using what sounds like sophomoric language. I don't mean to, but I have to make the point and not dance around this the way they do in universities, all this stupidity. The resolution of Hebrews that Jesus is ultimately the king and high priest, and it's the order of Melchizedek, is all nonsense. It only sounds good to a Christian who doesn't know anything. Who goes, oh yeah, and then they go to Genesis 13:14, they go to Psalm 110, they go, oh yeah, of course, Melchizedek is a priest, and you could find Tanakh where the sons of David were priests. It does not mean a priest of Aaron. The word Kohen, which is the word for priest, listen very carefully, comes from the word lechahen. Lechahen means to hold office. Do you understand? Therefore, be very careful with language. You could be fooled in a second. You could be like walking down the streets in New York when I was a kid, and there would be people on the street corners playing 3-card Monte, and they would have 3 cards, and they would show you whatever was the ace of spades, and then you bet money, and they would flip it around, and you couldn't figure out where the ace of spade was. People could use sleight of hand to deceive you. Do not be deceived by this nonsense. This may sound scary. Don't be scared. The word Kohen in our conventional language means a priest and only the sons of Aaron. But in Tanakh, the word Kohen could mean many things. It just means those who hold office. So if someone is given authority to hold office, whether it was Melchizedek, who was Shem, Melchizedek is not a proper name. It's Melech Tzedek. It's 2 words compressed together. Melech, king, Tzedek, righteous. And Shem, the descendant of Noah of blessed memory, was truly a righteous person. He passed on the torch to Abraham. How could someone like Shem live during the time of Abraham, when Abraham lived so much later? Look up how long Shem lived, and you'll realize that Shem was a contemporary of Abraham. In fact, Shem died when Jacob was 69 years old. He was passing on the torch to ultimately to the Bnei Israel, a unique nation, an Am HaNivcha that stood out. So, there's nothing remotely like this. Now, we have in Ezekiel 46, the caller mentioned, that the family of the prince, who is the Mashiach, who's from the house of David, he will give an allotment of land, a massive allotment of land, and it will be to the Mashiach and his sons. It does not say what the caller said it says. It does not say in Ezekiel 46 anywhere that Mashiach will have only 2 sons. I don't know who you are. Please don't be offended, but why do people say that it says that the prince will have only 2 sons? It doesn't say such a thing. Please, when you read this stuff in a book, I don't mean to be disrespectful. I really don't. I'm going to say this. I hope it's well taken. When you hear things like that, be careful, look it up. Go to the primary sources. This is what I'm saying is not mysterious here. Incidentally, if Jesus never got married and had children, how the heck did he have sons who would be heirs to the land that was given to him? According to Christianity, Jesus was an unmarried man and never had children. Well, how on earth does he have children? And Ezekiel, the end of Ezekiel, addresses what the allotment of land and who would get what tribes would get what, and what is the size of Eretz Yisrael. I can just tell you this, a lot bigger than it was during the first couple periods.
This is John Anon, and he says that it's referring to Ephraim and Manasseh, which will have many sons. So what's the point about that?
Just for a moment. So the point is that he will have sons. It doesn't say 2 sons, as the caller said. So that's number. I don't want to slide on to that because I didn't address yet the Mashiach ben Yosef part. We didn't get into that. Okay. So let's stay. Because he actually was arguing 2 points simultaneously, and those 2 points are contradictory. The person who called in with this, God bless, I don't take this personally, was making 2 contradictory points. One is that the Mashiach is both high priest and king. That means a descendant of Aaron and a descendant of David. Only we mean the patrilineal descent here. And then the caller argued that, in fact, the Mashiach will be the son of David and the son of Joseph, meaning Joseph, the son of Jacob. I mean, that's a totally different line. That means you're introducing now a third possibility. Don't get into rabbinic teachings. I will explain it in a moment. What is Mashiach ben Yosef? But everybody stop for a moment. I mean, we'll get to that point. I know that whoever you are, you're about to explode. Don't. Just please be patient. How many fathers could one person have? An ovum can be impregnated by 3 different sperm cells? Okay. So that can't be from 2. So the caller was contradicting himself. Now, please, I know I'm using strong terms. Please don't be offended. I'm very, very sorry. So there is here people are going to go ballistic, but I'm asking you not to. I'll explain, but I need to make it. There is no Mashiach ben Yosef. There's no Messiah, son of Joseph, in any conventional sense. Okay, got that? Okay, now I want to explain this point, and then you're going to say, but what do the rabbis say, and what does it say in Tractate Sukkah, Gemara Sukkah, Daf Nun Beis, Tractate Sukkah 52. I'll get into that in a moment. But there's a problem, a linguistic problem that's intruding on the question. And here it is. The word Mashiach, which means Moshach, means to anoint, to pour, appears in Tanakh 39 times. It is never referring to what we call as the Messiah today. Mashiach is called things. Prince David, he's just not called Mashiach in Tanakh. There are many different types of people who can be called Mashiach. The person who is anointed for a certain task certainly could be this David and his descendants. King Solomon was anointed. Certainly, you can have the priests were anointed. In fact, the word Mashiach appears in the book of Leviticus, Sefer Vayikra, more frequently than any other. But there, the Mashiach is referring to the priests. It appears everywhere in Leviticus. Chapter 4, it's everywhere in Leviticus. If you do a search on the priest, it will come, on Mashiach, just look up the word anointed. This is in software today. It'll take it 2 seconds. Just look up anointed, and it maps out on Leviticus. Why Leviticus? If what I'm telling you is true, that's exactly what you would expect to find, because Leviticus is Torah Saharan. It is about the laws, not only, but a large part of it is devoted to the laws regarding my family, the priesthood. So if what I told you is right, that the word Mashiach can be used about a priest, and it has nothing to do with the house of David. In fact, there was no house of David when Aaron was priest. Didn't even exist yet. That would happen much, much later. So therefore, the same word is now used about priests. You can have Mashiach and go all over the place, even describing someone who is not Jewish. See Isaiah 45, verse 1. And here it's talking about the Persian king, the great Cyrus. Isaiah 45, verse 1, who would give the command for the Jews to return to Eretz Israel to rebuild the second temple, the Beis HaMikdash, as we see in the opening chapter of Ezra. This is how the book of Ezra begins. And Isaiah 45, 1, Cyrus is, God refers to him as my Mashiach, as my anointed. And he's mentioned in Daniel 9 as God's anointed. So we have to be very careful, because the word Mashiach, anointed, could be capital A or lowercase a. Just let's take a deep breath here. This is very dangerous, because our language that we use today does not map onto Tanakh. We have conventional language today that is not used in Tanakh. Okay. So let's go through this for a moment. In Tanakh, the word Mashiach can apply to many different people. But we say the Messiah or Mashiach, we're only talking about one person. We don't mean the same thing. Mashiach is someone who's anointed for a certain role. Now let's get back to the point of Mashiach ben Yosef. He is never mentioned in Tanakh. There's nowhere in the Jewish Bible that you will find the term Messiah, the son of Joseph. You can find in rabbinic literature, as I mentioned earlier, but you can find it in many, many places. The rabbis, when they use the term Mashiach ben Yosef, they don't mean the Mashiach as in the Messiah. They mean someone who is anointed for a role, and his role is to be a leader in the Milchemes Gog uMagog, in the war of Gog at the end of days. He will, in this battlefield, will be killed publicly in battle as a military leader. His death on the battlefield will be so shocking, will strike so much pain among the children of Israel that they will repent and they will turn to Hashem. And it is the death of this very great person on the battlefield in what otherwise is a very successful battle, where those who come against Yerushalayim will be destroyed. But there will be this individual whose death will be striking to people, and people will then repent. There is an opinion that this is not a single person, but this is Jewish soldiers at the end of days. Whichever it is not a it's not a Mashiach role. It's not, meaning it is an eschatological role. It is the event that will trigger the coming of Mashiach, because based on Isaiah 59, verse 19 and 20, the children of Israel, Jacob, must repent. And the Mashiach, who is called the Goel, the Redeemer, will come to those who have repented in Jacob. Now, Paul will completely mess this up in Romans 11. Totally. Well, Paul will make it that the Mashiach, the Redeemer, is going to cause Jacob to turn their heart. That's not true. It's a misquote. You have to compare Isaiah 59, verse 19 and 20 to Romans chapter 11, side by side, to see that Paul has misapplied this passage completely. Again, I'm not being, you may go, well, Rabbi Singer's being picayune. I'm not. It's completely different. Are the Jews repenting of their own free will, their own volition, and the Mashiach then comes because they repent? Or is the Mashiach himself going to cause the Jewish people to repent? Meaning the Mashiach is going to die for everybody's sins. That's a huge difference. And that's what Paul will do to the text. It doesn't say it in the original text. Thus, the Mashiach ben Yosef is an eschatological military figure whose death will trigger repentance. Now, one other point, because this, to many people, this is very confusing. This person who gets killed in battle at the end of days does not die for anybody's sins, but rather it's the mourning that the children are going to mourn over him as one mourns over a firstborn son. And it'll be very similar to what happened in the valley of Megiddo. What happened there? That's when Josiah was killed by an Egyptian archer, which caused tremendous weeping among the children of Israel and had a tremendous spiritual effect on them. So he doesn't die for somebody's sin. There's no vicarious atonement, no human sacrifice. But a person may say, look at the sacrifice that this person gave. Look how great this person was that died in battle. I should repent because they see a tragedy. That, of course, was supposed to gaze upon the tragedies that we witness, unfortunately, and we should reconsider our lives and do true everywhere. In fact, in Isaiah 57, verse 1, it explicitly says, where Isaiah is rebuking the children of Israel very harshly. And he says, I've taken away the righteous of your generation, and nobody took it to heart. That's a real kick in the head. Because when we see tragedies occur, why they happen is beyond our scope. But one thing that tragedies can do is they can cause people to repent. There are many people who don't take their relationship with God very seriously, and then chas v'shalom, that person loses his father, God forbid, or loses his mother, God forbid, or suddenly someone who's very dear to her dies, and she goes, you know what? I should go to the synagogue. I should pray to Hashem. I should take my life more seriously. I see that I'm mortal, and life on this earth is temporary, and I better take my years seriously instead of wasting my years away. So, of course, tragedies can spark repentance, but no one's death can be for someone else's son, for anyone else's sin. So, therefore, mapping out everything here, you can have the complete restoration of all the 12 tribes restored. Joseph will certainly have a very important role, as we see in the book of Obadiah, that Joseph will be a fire, because Joseph is going to play an enormous military role. There's no other reason why Yehuda and Benjamin will have such a unique destiny. In fact, the Temple Mount sits exactly at the Grenetz, exactly at the border between the tribe of Judah and the tribe of Benjamin, exactly north. Because Vayigash Yehuda, because Yehuda approached his brother Joseph when he didn't even know who he was, and he stepped in to save Benjamin at a very critical moment. So Yehuda and Joseph are connected, but they are not the same. They're not interchangeable, and be very careful. And I'm doing this to be very careful when we use the word Mashiach. What do we mean by that? Are we using the biblical lexicon? Are we using the lexicon that we use today conventionally? When rabbis use this term in our literature, such as the Talmud and Midrashim, which are they using? If you borrow from one to another, if you move from one language to another, you have the same word. It means two different things, and that's what happens. Do Christians exploit this vulnerability? Absolutely. Do they all do it knowingly? No, they don't. The 99.9% of them get this stuff from booklets and pamphlets put out by missionaries online. You better believe it. Do they believe it? Many of them do, sincerely. Do they think the Jews are covering up stuff? Can they be convinced that they can? What you need to is go back and say, hold on for one moment. Let's go back and let's find out. Let's do our own research. If you don't, any argument, people have proofs for. People who deny the Holocaust have all their proofs. You can go on their website. The Holocaust never happened. They have proofs. I can tell you what their proofs are. The Holocaust deniers, so-called evidence. And if you don't know your stuff, if you didn't know you do your own research, you will get fooled in 1 second. The people who believe that, 9/11 was a conspiracy. I don't know if the Americans blew up the buildings themselves, that there was no plane that went into the Pentagon, that this was a conspiracy, that George Bush had the plane, that the Americans blew it up. They have websites, on and on. The reason why no one takes them seriously is that anyone can go back to the original literature, we have films in the modern age, and we know right away this is nonsense. So there are arguments, everything. No one is walking around going, I believe something that's completely unorthodox, and I have no argument to defend it. Tell me who this is. I have never met such a person. Tell me what religion or sect goes around going, I believe in something that's completely different than everybody else believes, and I have no evidence for it. There was doctors, incidentally, who claimed that HIV does not cause AIDS. They were nut jobs at the edge, but everybody else, there were people like this. But the flat earthers. I'm just using that. They don't have proofs. They have websites with proofs, but we dismiss these proofs because the evidence is so staggering. So be careful if you're getting your scholarship from little pamphlets and booklets and remote websites. Be careful. Be very, very careful. Go to the Children of Israel. Check it out for yourself. Anyways, I thank you for that question. And
Awesome.
please God, we'll see the coming of Mashiach quickly in our time.
Very good. Very good. Hang on. Why is this not working? I think my keyboard came undone. Okay, cool. All right, so I'm going to play this next voice clip here. This might be our last question. I'm not sure. It depends on how much time it takes to actually address it. So here we go.
Yeah, I've called before, but I'm still trying to get Rabbi Singer's explanation on the graven images that Moses made, especially the serpent on a stake, and then the cherubim. That those are graven images, and how are they explained by Rabbi? Thank you.
So in short, if graven images are forbidden, why did God have Moses make all this stuff, and why was it commanded to make these graven images for the ark and for the tabernacle and things like that? So,
all right. So the Torah says explicit everywhere that you cannot worship any graven images. It's in the Ten Commandments. It's forbidden. So how is it possible, for example, when the children of Israel were in the wilderness, that a bronze serpent was formed and was held high up with a flag or stake high up for everyone to look at, and those who were attacked by the serpents in the wilderness because they were behaving very badly, they would be healed. They wouldn't be harmed. Well, how are you allowed to worship an image? Or on the luchos on top of the ark, you have the cheruvim. You have a image of the two angels that are staring at each other. Well, there you have images openly. How are you allowed to worship images? The answer to that question is using the word graven. Well, how'd you get that word in there? Meaning, there's no prohibition of having a doll. There's no prohibition of having an image as long as you're not allowed to worship it. Nowhere are we told to worship the bronze serpent that was shaped. Think about this. You're in the wilderness. You're complaining up and down about how you're not loyal to Hashem. You don't really recognize that everything around you is from Hashem. And what happens? People are bitten by serpents that cause a tremendous amount of pain and death and suffering. And Hashem, now there's a play on word here, and that is that the word nechoshes and nachash is serpent or snake, and nechoshes is bronze, is that interchangeable consonants. So what is happening is if we hold that all the way up on the top of a staff, up in the sky, you look up and you see, what do you see? Think about this for a moment. You see this bronze serpent on a high place, looking up, right? And what do you see behind it? What do you see behind it? Think for a moment. You're in the wilderness. Okay? An image is made of a serpent made out of bronze. The language is a crossover. And now you look up and you see the bronze serpent on the top of a stick. And what do you see behind it? You see heaven. And what do you figure out from that? What is the source of the problem with serpents? What is the problem? Do we have a serpent problem, or do we have a problem that we aren't loyal to heaven? And you realize that all the suffering and difficulties we're having is not because you don't have a snake problem, you don't have a pet problem, you don't have a dangerous animal problem. You've got a God problem, and that was the purpose of it. As it turns out, later on, meaning little more than 600 years, 6 centuries after this event occurred in the wilderness, people actually started to worship it. It was never graven. But people eventually start to actually go, well, this is a relic of the past. Look at this. This is the serpent made out of bronze. It wasn't thrown away in the garbage when it was done from its job. They didn't throw it away. It was kept. There's a big danger. And eventually, stupid Jews started worshiping this as divine. And what Chizkiyahu HaMelech did is, oh, really? And he destroyed it. This is one of the great things that Chizkiyahu did. He destroyed it. So therefore, there's no prohibition to have in your house when my kids were small, I gave them Barbie dolls. There's no prohibition of having that because we're not worshiping it. That's all. If someone worships a doll, you have to destroy it and throw it out the window. Of course, that's a problem. There's no prohibition of having an image of an animal or anything as long as no one worships it. Now, if somebody says, you know what, there are some images that may cause someone to worship it, so then it becomes dangerous. You might not want to do that. So I want to be well. Let's go back again to the source. You using. I don't mean to be harsh. I'm going like I'm always in battle here. Let's lower the temperature. Forgive me. I just want to frame this. You're using the word graven images loosely. No, you're not allowed to have a graven images. You're not allowed to worship. You have to destroy it and despise it. Shakas to shakten of a saif to savenu kecheramu. No one disputes that, but these are not graven images. These images, these things are not to be worshipped. Meaning, are you crazy? It's like you have a camera. You can't take a picture of your sister-in-law. Of course you can take a picture of your sister-in-law, but you better not worship your sister-in-law. That's all. So the moment you take something, an image, whether it's now we're using photographs, or you have an image, if someone bows down to a photograph, whoa, now you have to destroy it. But if no one's worshiping it, it's not a graven image, a non-graven image, whether it's the images that are on top of the Aron, whether it was the bronze serpent, no one was called upon to ever worship it. There was no prohibition anywhere in Tanakh not to have an image of something if no one's worshiping it. You can have dolls, you can do this. Now, it could be that people, if someone feels, there's a danger or whatever, someone could say, I don't want to have it around me. That's fine. In fact, our Muslim cousins generally have the same view. They don't want images of the prophets or anything because it's very offensive, because they're afraid that someone might come to worship it. It's very interesting. I'll share something to you from Islamic law and thinking, which is just very, very interesting. That so it's the same basic concern. If no one's going to worship, it's not a problem. Now in Islam, which is devoted, it's given to there is no God but the true God. I mean, monotheism is very, very important. Even if you really can't stand Muslims, whoever you are, listen up very carefully. They worship one true God. Now, they're always very cognizant that the world about them is one where people are worshiping everything, and they're very worried about this. And therefore, in their Sharia, in their Islamic law, it was essentially forbidden to just make anything that was any image, because it might cause someone to worship it. So that was a stringency of Islam. There's a lot of discussion of this in Islamic thinking. But as it turns out, there is interesting discussion. Can Muslims have images of anything anywhere? And as it turns out, if, for instance, you have a Persian carpet, and there are images in the carpet, in Islam, in Sharia, in Islamic law, you can actually have that. Why? Because people are walking on it, and people are walking, they're definitely not going to worship it. So this is, when I was a student in my yeshiva, my rabbis, Rabbi Avigdor Miller, would talk about the Zerah Avram, the seed of Abraham. The point is, if you have something that could lead someone to worship it, of course, that's very dangerous. Then if someone's worshiping it, has to be destroyed. But if no one's worshiping it, no one would ever think of worshiping Ken and Barbie, you could certainly have it. I'm just using this as an example, something that is everywhere, it's ubiquitous in the world about us. So the fiery serpent is not a graven image. the angels that appear above the ark is not a graven image. It's forbidden to worship it. Nowhere in Tanakh does it say these are images that are to be worshipped. So thank you very much for your question.
Okay, very good, very good. Well, that's going to pretty much wrap us up for the day. So thank you all for tuning in. It's been a great show. Lots of great questions. Lots and lots of activity on YouTube. Hard to keep up with everything. If your question doesn't get answered, feel free to send Rabbi an email, toviasinger1@AOL.com. And yes, AOL does still exist. And for those of you who have subscribed to my YouTube channel, and some of you say you're still not getting notifications, I noticed on my email layout, it's separated into 3 tabs. There's like a primary, and then there's a social, and there's one for promotions. I noticed that my alerts for YouTube get brought up under one of the 2 hidden tabs, and they don't actually show up on my main screen. That could be the situation that you're experiencing. So double check that. Also double check that you've turned on the notification icon next to the subscribe button. That'll also be something. And do that with Rabbi Singer's videos as well. And I'll say this probably on the next 10 to 20 videos, because it's applicable. I still get questions a lot. Rabbi does too. Rabbi, have you ever covered X? Have you ever covered Y? Have you ever covered Z? And the answer is this: yes. If you want to find out without having to wait for a response from Rabbi or myself, just simply go to youtube.com, type in Tovia Singer Virgin Birth, Tovia Singer Eschatology, Tovia Singer whatever, and if the topic has come up and we've discussed it and he's got it registered, it'll actually show up there for you right away. It'll take you 10 seconds to pull up a video. Same with mine too. Type in Tanakh Talk and then your topic and see what pops up. So that's the easiest way to handle it. And it's very quick and it's very user-friendly that way too. So, all right, well, Rabbi, it's been fun, and I hope you have a great week. Oh, are we on next week or not? There's a holiday coming up, something.
Is there?
Somebody mentioned something. You may not be on this coming up week because of. I didn't see the full comment, but I figured it had to do something with.
Well, we'll talk about it all.
Okay, so if we're not, just keep an eye on my Facebook page, and I'll kind of let you know the future schedule. So anyway, outside of that, y'all have a great week. Shavua Tov, and Rabbi, you too. Love you guys. Bye.
Let's see.
תמיד כולם ביחד, חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד. איפוק זו העוצמה, ויתור זו הגדולה, השאיפה והכמיהה. אני אתה אתם תמיד כולם ביחד, חשוב מכל חשוב והכרחי להיות ביחד.